You are listening to South Niagara Conversations, a podcast presented by the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, along with 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM.
Hello, and thanks to everyone who's joined us for our South Niagara Conversation series. For those of you who are tuning in from afar, we represent the communities of Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, Fort Colborne, Wainfleet, Welland, and Pelham. We're located in Southern Ontario, no better place to live, work, or play. Joining me today is my guest co-host, John Van Brussel. Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Dolores?
I'm fantastic as well. I can't wait to get to this conversation. Earlier this week, the United States reopened its land border with Canada to non-essential travel for the first time since the onset of the pandemic in March of 2020. The United States requires that travelers be fully vaccinated, but Canada also requires anyone entering or re-entering the country to show proof of a negative PCR test, which costs about $200. Further, Canadian trucker drivers crossing into the U.S. will need to be vaccinated, and that was according to an announcement last week by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Well, I can't speak this morning. How will all of these moving parts impact our supply chain, hospitality sector, our economy? John, let's get to it. Who do we have joining us this morning for this fantastic conversation?
Thank you, Dolores. This morning, we welcome back Kory Schuler, Executive Director of the Niagara USA Chamber, Craig Turner, President of both the World Trade Center, Buffalo Niagara, and Momentum, and Joyce Morocco, President of Destination Niagara Falls and Elements of Success, as well as a former City Councilor of Niagara Falls. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Okay, Kory, let's start with you. As Dolores mentioned, this past Monday, the land border reopened to Canadian traffic entering the USA. Was that a fairly smooth reopening, and any ideas as to who was coming across?
There's still confusion over the exact testing requirements. So to enter Canada, you need a negative PCR test within 72 hours. So you can fly over into the United States without needing any kind of testing. So it's created a bit of confusion. Also, whether if you take a test in Canada, drive to the United States and drive back, does that test you took in Canada count as your 72-hour PCR test? So there is still some confusion of folks coming across the border. While we did see an uptick in people crossing, there was not a massive rush of people in the original initial opening time. I think as people are still trying to sort this all out.
Yeah, it's confusion. There's so many different messages. It's a set of rules for land. It's a set of rules for air. And just before we started the podcast, we were just talking about when you live in a border community, the border is seamless, right? Like we don't think twice pre-COVID of, okay, we're going out for dinner. Where do we want to go? You might end up on this side of the border or that side of the border. You go to concerts, you go to plays, you go visit friends, you just go out for pizza and chicken wings. Like it was just seamless. And that has kind of disappeared for 2 years. And, there was all this excitement about the border reopening, but people are not feeling comfortable because it is so confusing. Joyce, I mean, you've lived here your whole life. You get it.
Yeah, it's exactly. Dolores, thank you very much for having me participate in this. It is a very challenging topic that I think that we're all trying to deal with on both sides of the borders and at an international level. As a meeting planner, a professional consultant as well, and then also having Destination Niagara Regional website to promote all our businesses. We basically were quiet for the whole year. I mean, we still sent out information. We still promoted beautiful pictures of the Niagara region, telling people when the time is right to come. Well, I don't know that they still know when the time is right because we don't know when the time is right. The borders opened. And when the borders opened, like both sides, I would go by the hotel parking lots along the Fallsview area. And I didn't see an over influx of US visitors. Like you didn't see the plates, you could tell just from the drive time. So yeah, it's really challenging right now. And with this whole air, how are you doing it through the air, as you were just saying, as compared to the across the border, drive through. this testing is ridiculous. It's just, I mean, I understand that it's in place. I shouldn't say it's ridiculous because, first of all, from a tourism perspective, I'm saying open up. And then from the other side, I have to say, we need to listen to science. And I'm not the scientist, I want to make sure that it's safe because I'd rather take, the slow steps forward than a huge bunch of steps backwards. I don't want to go back there. I don't think anybody does. So let's do it safe and cautious, but let's get the message out. And I think that's where the government's lacking. The message on consistency. Why can you fly? You don't have to have the test, but yet if you're in the car and a family of 4, you could get up to, $1,000 by the time you come over and go back. They're not going to do that. Let's face it, they're not. And everyone's really not comfortable right now either. So we've got to get to that comfort zone and get the messaging correct.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of an issue too. There was an interesting statement on Global News that came out November 8th. From somebody in the medical field at University of Toronto, I believe. And his statement was, and I understand it, because again, we agree, we've got to be careful because we don't want to see an uptick in cases again. But the statement was along the lines of, it's not unreasonable to think that even vaccinated people who travel to the US may come back with COVID. When you have that kind of messaging out there to the average citizen, this is kind of inside baseball to all of us because we do all of this every day. Mm-hmm. When you see or read a statement like that, you're thinking, oh my God, my chances of going to that country and coming back sick are really substantially high. So the messaging here is playing an important role. And I don't think that anybody, whether it's the medical side or the political side, has found the right messaging to make people comfortable with free access of travel. And I think that's why you're seeing that slow trickle of people going back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Kory, you're right. And I mean, let's face it, the vaccine isn't going to stop us from getting COVID-19. It's just going to reduce the severity of it and hopefully keep a lot of the people out of our hospitals and that backlog that our medical people are dealing with. So, you still can get it. I mean, you can still get the cold and the flu. Yes. And right now, I think the big concern is with a lot of people is the children. And we're seeing right now that percentage that little spike that we're seeing now is really is in the young children that are unvaccinated or people that are unvaccinated. So that's still a little bit of the fear factor out there. And for God's sakes, we don't want to have our kids getting sick or a higher impact on our healthcare system, which is already overloaded here in Canada. I'm sure it's the same in the United States.
Yeah, for sure. Craig, I know you're itching to get into this conversation.
Yeah,
buddy.
So I've been working on border issues for close to 20 years now, actually. And most of that time, I mean, in that time, there was 9/11, there was WHDI. There's been some significant moments in border policy that have happened. But all that time, the goal was to eliminate the hassle at the border for both commerce and for individual travelers. And over the last 2 years, it seems like a lot of the work has just gone, a lot of that good work has gone away. I think we were in a really good place a couple of years ago, and now it's gone away. And, we look with World Trade Center, we look more to the business traveler and the commerce traveler. Going across the border, the chambers and folks like Joyce do such a great job on tourism. We don't even really put our fingers into that. But business travel has been a huge challenge. And this is something, and Dolores, you said at the beginning about, realizing that we're one economy and if anybody's ever done a Facebook ad, and the way you target your Facebook ads is you pick a location and then you can extend a circumference of up to 50 miles around that location. That's how you do your geographic targeting. So if I want to run a Facebook ad in Buffalo, half of the territory is in Canada. And I think a lot of people around the country don't realize that, and how this cut us off. You mentioned, yes, we would go to dinner on the other side of the border. I mean, back before the passport requirements, we would go to lunch. We would leave our office downtown Buffalo, go to lunch in Canada, and be back in time for the afternoon, which is crazy, and people don't realize that. But on the business side, what it's really hurt is that in-person interaction, especially when it comes to sales and business development and partnerships and relationships, not being able to cross the border because, somebody else in your company might have been essential the whole last year, but you're a salesperson, you're not essential, you don't get to cross the border. So to be able to not build those relationships and things has really hurt the regional economy. I would cross the border recreationally all the time, but more for business. And I would go, I'd cross the border and I'd wait for rush hour to end. I'd go at 9 and I'd schedule 5-6 meetings, and then I'd come back across the border, and that would be my day. And that's gone. That was gone. And yes, we have Zoom and we can talk, and we're on Zoom right now and we all see each other, but I think no one will say that that's the same as being in person and being able to put these things together. So I think when the border opened on November 8th, there was a lot of hope, but there's still a lot of questions. And like any of these things, whether it's large events or whatever policies they are, there's two facets to it. There is the rule that the state, the country, whatever, there's the rule. And then there's people's attitudes to it. Mm-hmm. The state may say you can put 100 people in a room, mm-hmm. but half of the people in your membership are not interested in that at this point. So, or in the case of some of these larger companies, can't even do it anyway. So I think that's what you're facing on the border is, yes, it's open. We stood there with our signs that said "Welcome Canadians," but I don't think I think the avidness to cross the border is being stunted by some of these other policies that are still in place, and then the confusion over those policies.
Yeah, I want to bring John into the conversation because John, prior to COVID, you crossed the border every day for your business, and you've been in a very interesting situation since, and are still. So I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, well, for me, it was a perfect storm. Not only did COVID hit, but at the same time, my E2 visa came up for renewal. And I had been bugging my lawyer in the US for a year to get it in. He said, no, we can do it in July. Then he said, no, we'll do it in November. No, we'll do it in February of the next year. It was expiring in January of that year.
So that visa is what, just for our listeners?
It's a treaty investor visa. So that means that I have a business that I invested a substantial amount of money in the US, and it's operating and it's a viable entity. And I'm the president of the company. So as a key person, or now as we're called essential, I should be able to go back and forth. So I stayed home until this December last year. And then I said, well, this is retarded. I'm not getting, pardon my French, I can't say that word anymore. My daughter tells me, but I was sitting here for 9 months and I was able to run my business because we were blessed with a guy that had worked for us before, and he was working for the business that we rent from. So he did all our work. But in December, I went across and I said, well, here's all my paperwork. The embassy has my application. What can you do for me? And they basically told me at the bridge, they said, well, because of your visa classification, you can only come in one day every 2 months. And I'm thinking, well, what business person could go to their business once every 2 months and run it successfully? Well, I would say I can, because we've done it. But if this had been 20 or 30 years ago, the business would have been closed, because we wouldn't have had email, we wouldn't have had cell phones and all the technology that basically makes borders almost, other than having to have somebody physically pack and ship stuff, the border doesn't really impact my knowledge and my dealing with my customers. Where it does impact me is if I'm looking for a specific machine part for a customer, and then I got to tell this guy how to find it, and I got to remember where it was 2 years ago. And, it's just a nightmare. And every time I go across, they ask me, where are you going? I said, well, I'm going to Veneer Systems. And it's the same spiel. And then the last time I went was really interesting, because the young lady at the booth in the US said, oh yeah, you should never use a lawyer for your visas. You should go through us. We're here to help you. And we want to help you fill out the application. I just about rolled my eyes, but we all know when you go to either border point, you don't get smart with anybody, because then you get a nice long visit in door number 2, and you may get a black mark on your crossing. But so that's kind of a long-winded version of my story right now. And now I'm just waiting and seeing. And I told the guy 2 months ago when I crossed, I said, you know what, I'll probably get this visa by the time I'm ready to retire, which is 3 years. So, and he said, no, you'll get it before then. I said, I should make you a wager.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you guys, Kory and Craig, hearing similar stories from businesses on your side? Having
The
similar
visa,
issues?
the visa issue was an issue the whole time because I think a lot of people forgot or didn't think about the fact that, well, their business was shut down. Our federal government was shut down too. And there was immediately this huge backlog of visas. So even, we did a number of panel discussions on immigration over the last year and a half, and to the credit of the folks in our membership that did those sessions for us, they said, look, we're trying. You're gonna be waiting a long time, and it's not because of approvals. It's just because somebody physically has to fill out the paperwork for you within the federal government, and they're not working, they're not in the office, their hands are tied in many ways. So that was really kind of what we heard on the visa issues.
Yeah. Kory, anything to add?
No, I mean, Craig is right. That the government backlog was just an additional, just a little additional topping on the icing on the cake of this last year. So
Mm-hmm. I know.
I'll tell a quick funny story. I was in we were in Tarpon Springs, Florida last month, and we went to a restaurant and ordered the food. I think I ordered like the whole fish or something, and we're sitting there waiting. It's like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and all of a sudden the waiter and his manager come out, and the waiter like crouches down next to the table, and he says, I have to apologize. We had your fish in the oven and for like 20 minutes, and then we realized the pilot light was out. He said, so I'm going to order anything else you want off the menu. It's on me. We're really sorry. And I looked at him and I said, I have to be honest with you. This is the first time in 2 years that somebody didn't blame COVID for what went wrong.
That's right. That's right. We've gotten away with a lot.
Yep.
Being able to blame it on COVID.
Participating business of the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, an amazing online presence for you, has arrived. NiagaraGiftCards.com is a website for you to sell your business's gift cards and receive 100% of the proceeds. Increase your digital presence and build your business. Join the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce 6-month pilot project for free today. Visit NiagaraGiftCards.com to learn more and to fill out the sign-up sheet. The South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, helping businesses grow.
So Craig, we one of the other issues that we're dealing with on both sides of the border is labor shortages.
Yeah.
And now with the vaccination requirement for the truck drivers, what do you think the impact will be on those that rely on cross-border freight?
Yeah, this is a huge issue we've found and we're very, very concerned about. And I want to thank Buffalo Business First and Katie Anderson for actually helping us with some articles on this and helping to get the word out about it. So right now, a U.S. truck driver does not need a vaccine to go into Canada.
Which surprises me. I didn't know that. Joyce, did you know that?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Here's what I'll say. And we can sit here and debate all the decisions that were made over the last year and a half. But one important decision that they did a good job on was they kept the trucks moving. They kept commerce going between the two countries. They didn't put roadblocks there. March and April last year, everything was shut down. So trucking was way down. But by August, September, trucks coming across the Buffalo Niagara bridges were back at about 100% to where they were in 2019. So that was good. And that kept commerce in the flowing across the border, kept the supply chains. There were problems, yes, the toilet paper, the bicycle, all the different things, but the supply chains were moving, especially for the manufacturers. But now on November 8th, when we're going to let the Canadians come into the US, it comes with this other hitch about the truckers. So we've been working with the Ontario Trucking Association, and they put a letter together, and they estimate that that's going to pull 22,000 Canadian truckers out of the cross-border pool. Now, that's, again, these are mandates, and you say, well, why don't they just get the vaccine? Well, here's the way the trucking works that people don't really realize. There's so much, all the supply chain issues have created a big supply and demand issue. There is not enough supply to meet the demand. Mm-hmm. So I'm a trucker. I don't want to deal with getting vaccinated across the border. There is plenty of other business out there for me to do domestically. So instead of going from Hamilton to Syracuse, I go from Hamilton to Montreal, make the same amount of money, and the opportunities are there. So it's a challenge. And trucking, I would argue, these folks, they're as socially distant as any industry out there. Maybe a park ranger by himself in the middle of a national park is socially distant, but truck drivers are pretty socially distant. So this is an issue, and we really fear that it's going to cause some significant challenges on the in the supply chain cross border here, because the two things that are going to happen: one, the capacity is going to be gone. You take out 22,000 truckers out of a system, the capacity is going to be gone. So any of these cross border pieces that are happening, you're just not going to be able to find a truck to do it, literally. And then what's going to happen to the trucks that actually are crossing the border? You jack up the price of those now because you don't have as much. And so they call it a supply chain for a reason, which is very interesting. And this is what a lot of people don't understand. So I'm a Canadian manufacturer or distributor. I know I'm going to have trucking problems across the border. What's my solution? Well, I'm going to get all my stuff across the border into the US into a warehouse and then just distribute it from there. We don't have any warehouse space. So now you're kind of stuck. We got to figure out a way through this. The thing that's happening out in California is fascinating, because the media has focused on the ships. You've got the dramatic images of all the cargo ships sitting out on the water. But what really happened was California passed a law that eliminated a large percentage of truckers from actually to be able to use the port. So they eliminated the opportunity for owner operators to get to the port. So individual drivers, which is a large, like 30-40% of their truckers previously did not belong to the large trucking companies. They were, somebody who bought a truck and they're just filling, doing the work themselves. And then they passed a law about a green law that all the trucks that access the port have to be built in the last 3 years. So when you take a large percentage, and I'm using that just to explain the supply chain, it's not just the boat sitting out there. It's not just the workers at the dock. If the boat pulls in, the worker does it, and there's no truck, you're stuck anyway. So, and then that causes problems all the way down. So that's what we're looking at back on the border here, is you're just going to have this hole in the cross-border supply chain, which, like I said, there's other business for those people to take, and they're going to take it. So now, how do you deal with the fact that you pulled 22,000 trucks out of the cross-border supply chain, and it's going to be an issue. Right. So we've weighed in with our congressman on it to help get his advocacy on it, but not quite sure where this is going to go yet.
Yeah, and with so many things during COVID, it's never just black and white. There's so much gray. And, here in Canada, if you are a truck driver in Manitoba and you come to Ontario because, there's a ton of jobs and you're vaccinated, great. You're not licensed to be a truck driver in Ontario. Like, we have these interprovincial barriers that adds to the problem as well. But you know what? There's not a day that goes by that I don't hear a news report or read an article about, shortages and heading into Christmas. And I think yesterday morning it was, about blueberries and why my blueberries are spoiling so much faster. So it's every day. And I know that people are in a panic about, in the States, it's the cranberries for your Thanksgiving turkey. There's no aluminum for the cans. Right? I got that right?
Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but it doesn't surprise me. I'll tell you, we did a whole panel session with Buffalo Business First yesterday on this whole topic. So, because you're talking and I can start to go into why all these things are happening, but we'd be here for another 4 hours. So I'll just do the plug. I think next week or so, this other panel is going to come out, and you can kind of get our take on why these supply chain problems are happening.
Yeah.
And to Craig's point, I just have to say, Dolores, to Craig's point, that it's just a huge domino effect on the economic impact that we have everywhere and all that. I mean, thank goodness for the truckers and our frontline servers that were keeping everything going when we were all locked down. The country would have been shut down. You can't shut down. And we're still feeling those impacts right now. So yes, both countries have to, get something working for these truckers that won't be vaccinated. I know that there's other people that won't be vaccinated, and there's other, measures in place to help them, continue to keep working. We're seeing that also in the healthcare too, that some people just don't want to get vaccinated. We've got to have people go. And until you get that comfort zone, I don't know that you're going to get people back in the office, let alone crossing the border. And just on a quick topic too, as an international meeting planner too, I have to say, it's great to see that we're going to get people face to face, because they're so tired of the Zoom meetings and everything else. They want to be face to face. And it was a struggle to get my clients to book a June conference for 700 people and face to face. And the board finally unanimously said, okay, we'll do it. And we're still looking to it. The international is starting to pop up, but a lot of the international conferences are looking more at 2023. They just feel it's going to be a better comfort zone. Air travel and every cross border will be a lot more, I guess, worked out, as we hope for heaven's sakes that's the case, because we really have to get this world back to where it was in 2019 pre-COVID. Everybody wants to be there.
Yeah, you make such a good point, because we hear from our members, yes, you know, we want in-person events, we want to get back to in-person, and then we host an in-person event and nobody shows up. And the people who do show up are like, I was so nervous about coming, I'm not, you know, I'm a little nervous. And so as much as people say yes, 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 they're not there yet. And, you know, we've developed different habits, different routines. There's a lot of confusion around what's safe and what's not. And it's going to take us a little bit of time to get there. And Kory, I don't know if you're experiencing the same with your membership.
Absolutely. I swear, I really truly believe that we all collectively have COVID PTSD, where we say that we're ready to, you know, go face to face, have events. And it's very divided, because for every person that wants to get face to face, you also have a person that is, you know, they'll walk in the room and turn right back around and walk out.
Yes.
And then we have a contingent that, quite frankly, has been able to capitalize on the COVID pandemic. So working from home has been great. I would love to see someone do a study of work productivity and where we've really failed with everybody working from home. How many lost man hours from people not doing anything? And I think it's going to be hard. I mean, we have a large scale event in March, and we're already panicking. We're already getting calls from some of the guests saying, well, you know, do you think this is going to happen? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is in March and you're asking me these questions.
Well, you know what, Kory, it took 2 years to change people's habits. And I think right now, and people said to me, it's going to be 2 years, it won't be till 2023. And I'm like, you've got to be crazy. There's no way. I can't wait to get the hell out and start meeting people and be in company with parties and dinner parties and events and functions. But maybe that's just my way as a consultant meeting planner. That's what I'm looking for. But you're right. People are still hesitant to do that. But, you know, the study too, from working at home, but also what's the mental issues and the impact that it's going to have from the not socializing. And I think that's another thing too, that stepped people back from, you were so sociable that now they've all said, you know, social distance. Well, I don't want to social distance anymore. Like I want to socialize. And we got to get that back into people's mindset too. It's okay. You can do that. You can hug one another.
Well, and you're still, from a workforce standpoint, you're still working. So even working from home does not mean you abandon all workplace rules and propriety.
Right.
And so we've been tracking, you know, stories of, you know, asking, you know, from people that are still have employees working from home, like what are some of the horror stories? And it's amazing some of the things you hear where people are emboldened. One of the people I just talked to last week, she had an employee tell her coming back to the office does not work for him because it's going to interfere with his getting stuff done, grocery shopping, house cleaning. And she said, but I'm paying you for 8 hours, so you shouldn't be doing those things during the work hour, during the workday anyway. And he really objected to that's his time. And she said, well, no, it's not. So I think when we do finally really start coming out of this, you're going to have a generation of people that are in the workforce, or I shouldn't say generation, you're going to have a segment of people in the workforce that really need to relearn working skills because they're not going to be able to adapt of having to dress for the office and have decorum and actually showing up on time and doing things. This is going to be, I think 2023 is being optimistic for this to settle out.
But let me raise this though, and this is my challenge with this, and to Joyce's point about the amount of time it takes to build a habit. We are all talking on both sides of the border in Western New York, and and Southern Ontario, two areas that have been pretty heavy-handed with the COVID restrictions over the last year and a half. I have been to 150-person events in Pittsburgh, Canton, and Clearwater, Florida in the last 6 weeks. And it was glorious. I mean, it was wonderful. And there was nobody was worried. Nobody was, I mean, there wasn't a mask in the place. And it's like, it's interesting to see that Joyce, I think you're right on. This has been hammered into us here. And again, and I don't want to, sovereignty and everything. I don't, one thing I've learned in advocating on the border is that we have two different countries here that have two very different approaches to everything. So, I look at when like our elected officials send a letter to Ottawa asking them to do something. I'm like, Ottawa doesn't care what our elected officials say. They're not even citizens. I mean, so, but that being the case, there is different messaging around the country that people have been around both countries that people have been inundated with. And you see that I use the analogy on our call earlier, think about like in a snowstorm, we got a snowstorm here, which we have all the time, and you walk outside in the morning and the snow's drifting and you got 10 inches on your driveway. So you shovel it or you snow blow it, and then you get in the car and you drive down to the main highway and it's perfectly clear. There's no snow anyway. And you don't know that until you actually get there. Going to some other parts of the country that have different policies has been eye-opening to me, because it's like, it's a different world, and the numbers aren't any different, and there's and people are different, and business is thriving. So that's a challenge for me to see that. And obviously we all chose to live where we live, and there's a way of life in that community. So but some of the things about about habit forming and things like that, you see it in different parts of the US, at least. And it's kind of eye-opening as to what we're doing here versus what they might be doing in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is 1 hour away, and has some very different rules. It's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. I wanted to talk a little bit about, and Joyce, you might be able to lead the conversation, the impact that the border has had on families. Again, our border is seamless. We have family members and friends that live on both sides of the border. And, there have been families who haven't seen each other in close to 2 years because of it. And so, any thoughts on that? Any experience with that, Joyce? And then we'll get to you too, Kory.
I can say my daughter, there's a big border. My daughter lives in Australia, and my son-in-law, and my new 2-month-old granddaughter, who I haven't seen for over 2 years now because of COVID and the struggle is. So they're finally going to be able to come to Canada and visit on the 24th of December. But it's been a challenge. I just want to talk about this too. It's been a challenge for them. In 1 week, they had their flight changed 11 times. They were able to have, for the baby and the bassinet, and the seats that they had were perfect, what she had booked. And that changed. They lost the seats. They couldn't have any luggage. You're talking international travel. They wouldn't even give them one piece of luggage as complimentary. You just had to pay for it. So, I mean, that they've got to fix that. That is huge. And I'm telling you, it's Air Canada. That's Air Canada. That's our national carrier. They got to get their stuff together and start making people feel comfortable, because if you're going to start going through that and that message. So it's just not the border crossing. You've got air as an issue. We also saw a lot of our American friends own businesses or homes in Crystal Beach and in the Muskoka area. And it was a struggle. We went to Crystal Beach and we saw them all empty. There was nobody there. And I know that they were trying to get over to see their homes. They had to try to connect with other people here in Niagara to check on their properties, families that didn't see, and they lost loved ones. Did you have people that were your children born and you didn't see your new family members, but you lost family members and not having a chance to see them. It was huge, a huge impact on both sides of us not being able to connect with just friends and family and our businesses and homes, second homes for some.
Yeah. We've heard a lot of stories. You make the point of the cottagers. I know, Kory, you've got a director who had a cottage in Port Colborne along our south coast, Lake Erie. I mean, in the summer, the population of both Fort Erie and Port Colborne doubles, and Wainfleet. it doubles because it's the Americans who own the cottages, and they come and they live and they go to the Buffalo Canoe Club and they partake in all of these things, and it just hasn't happened. So it is huge. And I think at one point too, I'd heard that even their ability to get insurance on their cottages was at risk because, of course, you're not there. Kory, I wanted you to weigh in as well.
Yeah, that was a very big problem. And in that particular case, the property, she was a long-term renter. But in the meantime, with the border closing, the owner sold it. But all the people that had been renting up there for 20 years, their cottages were all full of their personal effects. Yeah. So it all went into a storage unit. And it was, well, good luck tracking down your personal effects. They only were able to track down some of them because in the new their new glossy brochures to re-rent those properties, the new owners outfitted those cottages with the property from the previous cottage owners. So they actually set them up and staged those cottages with the furnishings from the people that got removed. So, that's still an ongoing issue. And I think that's who you're seeing more so across the border now. Not so much the people that are shopping, it's the people that are trying to reconnect with families. Mm-hmm. So if you go to the malls and things here, you're not seeing parking lots full of Canadian license plates. Mm-hmm. The people that are coming over are actually those people that are reconnecting after 2 years. Yeah, which is good.
It is good. It is good. It's interesting because when the Canadian border opened to Americans back in October, I guess it was, that Monday, our office in Fort Erie started receiving calls from our locals saying, there's Americans in our Sobeys and they're not wearing a mask. What are you going to do about this? So, John, you're in Fort Erie. Any thoughts or reflections on that piece?
Yeah, well, I find it a bit comical. I know there was a huge push all summer for the Americans to get over. And again, it's not the average Joe that wants to get over. It's the people that own lakefront property. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even after we opened, I was having dinner in Crystal Beach. And I was, there were 3 of the 4 tables around us were American people. They were like older couples, like in their 80s, that were there at their summer homes or whatever. But, and the same thing when it opened, I see the Peace Bridge every morning. I walk my dog down by there. So I see what's going across the bridge. And I didn't, on Monday, I was stunned. There was nothing, just trucks. Mm-hmm. I saw maybe 6 cars in a half an hour. So that told me that, and then I was talking to my friend I walked with, and he said, there was a big push for the snowbirds to get south because they got to get to Florida for their 6-month stay, right? And then after that, it was calm. The bridge was just trucks. So it's, I think there was a lot of chest beating about, we got to open up the border for the U.S. And then it was, how come we open up ours and they won't open up theirs? And there was lots of stuff like that going around locally. And it's like, you know what? It's like one of you said earlier, they're 2 independent countries. So you're not going to lord over one or the other. I mean, we get pushed around a little bit more, in my opinion, than the other way. But, also we have businesses that rely on the influx of Americans to come and eat at their restaurants and buy their gas and buy their groceries and, get their lawn care done while they're away. And there's businesses set up in Fort Erie that look after cottages for people during the winter. So it was an inconvenience for the people, I think, but all they would have to do is probably extend the person they had doing it for the winter and say, hey, can you do it year round till this is over? So, but it's, from my standpoint, being a small business, I just sit back here and I just go, I'm just, they could sweep me under the rug and I could disappear from the face of the earth. They would not care. And I think it goes for both sides of the border, whether you're a small business. I mean, we're 2 people. My sister is actually an American citizen. She tried to cross. Well, she actually crossed. She went to the U.S., no problem. And coming home, they wanted her to have a test. And she said, well, I'm an essential employee. She's the CFO of our company. So, and she said, well, I didn't know I was essential. I put, exempt. They said, no, you haven't established a pattern. I'm like, well, that's a new one that I hadn't heard. I've heard lots of stories at the border, but coming back to Canada, it's like, well, you haven't established a pattern. So then I was going over a month later and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder if I'm going to get the same show and their song and dance when I come back, but it didn't happen. They just kind of paused and said, oh, okay, how come you only go over every 2 months? I said, because that's all I'm allowed because of my visa status.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have not done a good job. I mean, the U.S. on border issues in general, has not done a great job in conveying information. And I think back to 9/11, because pre 9/11, really think of how open our border was. I mean, you could walk across, drive across, it was nothing. But then after 9/11, when all the guidelines started coming in with passports and IDs and enhanced licenses, and you had that long period of time of adjustment where people didn't understand what the rules were. If you took, if grandparents took grandchildren over, they needed a letter to say that they had permission from the custodial parent. Like, people didn't know that stuff.
Right.
And that's a big problem. And unfortunately, that's an issue here in the US, is that we have done a poor job of getting that information out to the general public, of what you actually need, what you have to actually do. We hear about the cost of PCR tests. We know that they're there. I mean, it's funny. So on our last call, Craig and I, we were talking about now the price is creeping up. So now you're seeing them hit over $300 for a rapid PCR test. And until we really find a way to get that information out there, we're going to run into all these types of problems, because I shouldn't say you're letting, that's probably not the right phrase, but people at the border security are kind of the ones that are the gatekeepers. So you might get one that's fine and says, go ahead. You're going to get another one that says, well, it interprets the rules the other way. And until we have clear-cut, defined rules that are publicly acknowledged, this is going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the U.S. has handled it well. I don't think we've handled the whole reopening. I don't think we've handled disseminating information well. I mean, we're all like, this is all what we do, and we all still have questions.
Right.
The average person, and we're border communities. So not only is it part of our jobs, but we also are used to it because we live right at the border. So if you're somebody coming from the Midwest of the United States that's nowhere near a border, they're not going to understand all of this. And vice versa. If you're somebody coming from Canada into the US that really maybe doesn't do it that regularly, it's going to be very confusing. And that's something that we have to figure out, how to get one clear-cut set of guidelines. Until we do that, this is going to be a problem.
Yeah, you make such a good point. And we've had this conversation before with Kory and Craig, where, the farther you are from the border, the less you understand that you are crossing a border. And, we would laugh because our chamber offices would get calls from Americans wanting to come for a visit. We'd be getting calls in like April and May of 2020. Like, we're in the thick of things, and people saying, okay, what hotels can I stay at? What attractions do you recommend? What are the best restaurants? And we're like, none. I mean, you can't get across the border. Like, the attractions are closed. Like, there's like, if you want takeout, yeah, but you can't get across the border. And they just didn't, they just didn't comprehend. So you make such a good point, because yes, I mean, it's confusing for us. And if you're that farther removed from the border, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, it is just not, yeah. we have some good stories about calls that we've received. I think someday we're going to have to do a podcast on just some of the best calls that we receive.
or a book.
Tourists.
I'm definitely in for that podcast.
Yeah. Well, John, this has been a really great conversation, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. I think we need to start wrapping it up. We always have such good intentions to keep it, concise, but it always gets away from us. Anybody have any closing remarks that they'd like to make? Some final thoughts?
No,
Joyce?
just hopefully we'll see you soon.
Yes.
In
Yeah.
person.
In person.
In person.
Let's make that a point, the next meeting, that it is face-to-face, so that would be great. And I think too that we both have some challenges there with our countries and getting the messaging right to make people feel comfortable, and that we can get people crossing and get things moving again. We just really are looking forward to that. I mean, we can spend, and our local tourism, Niagara Falls tourism and Destination Niagara, we all spend a lot of money with our partners to promote coming here, but we still need our governments on both sides to work together to make it easy for everyone to do that. So, we both have beautiful countries, and we're looking forward to working in partnership with everyone again real soon, and sharing that cross-border experience. So I wish everyone all the best, and thank you for having me.
And Joyce, I echo what you said about working together. I think we, all of us in both communities need to be realistic. And like we said many times, just remember, we got two different countries here that approach things very differently. So in any of the Canadians should do this, the US should do this. It's not gonna work. But what can happen is if we as the business community, or we as local elected leaders, can get together on these things and send that message to Ottawa and Washington, that's very powerful. There used to be a group, there were two. There was the Binational Mayors Coalition, and then there was the Niagara 10. The Niagara 10 was run by the consulate when we had a large consulate here. We have two people here now. We had 70 people here at one time, and the Niagara 10 was all the councilors, mayors, county executives, everybody from both sides of the border, and they met once a year. But the Binational Mayors group met like every quarter. And I actually had the opportunity when I was with the Chamber of Commerce to staff that group, and it was powerful. I mean,
I attended a few. It was great.
Yeah, when you want to have a cohesive cross-border message, having the executive from each of the towns and cities along the border, when we signed their names to a letter, it was pretty powerful. But it was a good model, because the fact that our two chambers are working together is important, because you can get a cross-border statement to both countries and say, we understand the politics on both sides of the border, but for things to work best in this region, these are the steps that need to be taken. So that's why I encourage everybody listening to help us rally around that, because those are it's an important message. If that message isn't out there, there's decisions being made in Washington, decisions being made in Ottawa by people that have never seen this border, have never been here. Right. And never seen our community. So if we can rally our business community around it, I think that's important. So thank you, Dolores, and John for having us on.
Yeah, thank you. This was again a great conversation. I do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, the Small Business Enterprise Center, City of Niagara Falls. Always a great sponsor of our podcast, and we appreciate their support.
Do you have an idea for a small business? Maybe you're trying to grow a business that you've already started. Whatever the case, the Niagara Falls Small Business Enterprise Center is a community service that is here to help, offering entrepreneurs the tools to start and grow their businesses. The Small Business Enterprise Center is your one-stop for free business information and advice. Serving Niagara Falls and South Niagara, learn more about how we can help you and your business succeed at niagarafalls.ca/SBEC.
Well, John, I guess it's a wrap. Next week, we're going to be welcoming the president of Niagara College, Sean Kennedy, as well as the interim president of Brock University, Dr. Lynn Wells. Both the college and university have done a remarkable job in terms of meeting the needs of the community. We'll hear from both presidents about some of the unique and perhaps surprising research programs and services that they're involved in. To all of our listeners, send us the topics that you're talking about, because we want to talk about them too. Thanks again for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful week.